From the studios of the Optimism Institute, welcome to the Blue Sky Podcast. I'm your host, Bill Burke, and in every Blue Sky episode, we'll be speaking to leaders, researchers, and thinkers whose stories and insights will remind us that there is always blue sky above. Sometimes you just have to get your head above the clouds to see it. The first time I ever saw today's Blue Sky guest, it was on a TV commercial. Marcy Syms worked for the company her father founded, the Syms retail clothing stores, and occasionally appeared on their advertisements. Fast forward a couple of decades, and when I joined an academic fellowship in 2022, one of my fellows was none other than Marcy. I then came to know Marcy well and developed an understanding of and respect for her optimism and drive. When I found out she'd written a book and that it was coming out this summer entitled Leading with Respect, I asked if she'd come on this show, and I was very happy when she said yes. For over a decade, Marcy Syms was CEO of Syms Corporation, which operated in 16 states selling designer and brand name apparel and housewares to educated consumers. When Syms Corp had its IPO on the New York Stock Exchange, Marcy became its first president and one of the youngest female presidents of a New York Stock Exchange company. She helped lead the company from a New York-based retailer to a national retailer with 50 stores. Marcy Syms is the founding trustee and president of the Syms Foundation, which supports programs in education, scientific research, societal justice, and the arts. Marcy also serves on several not-for-profit boards, including the ERA Project at Columbia Law School, the City University of New York's Macaulay Honor School, and the Syms School of Business at Yeshiva University. Since 2015, she's been on the board of National Public Radio and is a past overseer of Boston University. I hope you enjoy this Blue Sky conversation with Marcy Syms as much as I did. Marcy Syms, welcome to the Blue Sky Podcast.
Hi, Bill.
I am so happy to have you on. We have become friends, and I think it's a great testament to your book. I know you quite well, but I learned so much about you from reading your book, and I am really excited for other people to have that opportunity. I want to start actually with a line from your late father, Syms. And you had this, I think, pinned up to your office. Don't let the bad guys win. What was he talking about when he said that?
Well, if you've been paying attention, you know that in most situations, there are two sides at least. So in order to bolster yourself up
Yes,
and do all the work necessary to be prepared, you got to identify yourself as the good guy.
yes,
Now, this doesn't really have to do with cowboys and conquering the West. It has to do with how do you structure an encounter? What do you want to accomplish?
yes,
And I would even bring in the word respect to this idea of being prepared and identifying who's going to be the winner and who's going to feel that they didn't get everything they wanted.
yes,
But understand that when you have two sides, at least, in order for it to be where both leave the room feeling respected, each side has to feel that their needs were met.
yes. Beautifully put it. And your book, we said in the introduction, is Leading with Respect. I grew up watching, I've told you this, I grew up watching your dad and later you on the commercials. And to this day, I could remember an educated consumer is our best customer, your tagline. And right there in that line is a respect for the customer.
Correct.
Can you talk about the importance of that in the building of your company?
Absolutely. It was foundational. And it was something, my dad opened his first store in 1959 and didn't do his first live 60-second commercial at the halftime of a Giants football game until 1974. So it was many years of observing what his relationship to the vendors were, what his
Yep.
relationship to the customers were, and particularly how he enjoyed representing the experience in the store to the customer. And his most fun thing, he was most busy because it was lower Manhattan, right near
Yeah.
Wall Street.
Yeah.
We were at the time there was one store 3 blocks south of the World Trade Center,
Yep.
right near the Hudson Tubes, where you'd go to New Jersey, take a underground train to New Jersey.
Yep.
And he would find that telling the customer everything that he knew about the clothing, why this price was such a deal that you weren't going to find it anywhere else.
Yes. I love that. Okay, so you were obviously very much influenced by your father growing up, but even perhaps before that, or certainly someone from the generation prior, your grandmother.
Yes.
I was fascinated to read about your grandmother, a Romanian immigrant. So you can imagine how far back this would go. And she talked to you at an early age as a young girl about the importance, how proud she was to have her own job
Yep.
and the importance of independence in a young woman, way ahead of her time. Can you talk about the influence that she had on you?
Yes. Well, first, the journey of getting to America back in 1906. And she was a young woman. I think at the time it was just before her 8th birthday. And she came over with just one other person and was met by cousins who were in Philadelphia. And they didn't let her go to school, they put her right to work. She did
Sure.
learn English and she did study. And when she had the ability to find work that she wanted to do herself, she got a job in a shoe store. And it was considered pretty late to get married. This was my mother's mother, Clara.
Yes.
Clara was in
Okay.
her mid 20s before she got married. And it was pretty tough for women at that time to not be married by 25, 26. And she said that she became the assistant store manager of a shoe store. And she said she never had to depend on someone else to pay the bills. And she said, your financial independence is the most valuable gift you can give yourself. She was very specific about that. She told me several times.
Wow.
And I must say, even before I became a feminist,
Yeah.
I totally identified with that as a very important message for anybody, but particularly for young women at that time.
Incredible. And your family, she obviously went through incredible hardships to come over from
Yes, she did.
Romania. And then I'd like to talk to you about it. Really, I found it a very tender part of the book when your father is so excited that he's got the means and you're gonna go out to Westchester, you're gonna get out of the city and buy this beautiful home in a town in Westchester. And you and your family were the brunt of incredible overt anti-Semitism, not hidden, not veiled, not, bullying in school, all of that. And as I read that as someone who has never experienced anything approaching that, I'd love to hear your thoughts on how you as a person and your family gets through that. What's the resilience? Because it'd be very easy, it seems to me, to just pack it up and, get out of Dodge. But somehow your family was able to persevere. Can you just reflect on that?
I have a great deal.
Yeah.
And honestly, Bill, at a certain point, getting out of Dodge is the better decision.
Yes.
And I went through 3 years of being in Bronxville, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade.
Ugh.
My 3 younger brothers and 2 younger sisters were also in the school district. We were the only Jews in the school district. And the level of anxiety and fear that was incorporated into the daily routine of learning and going to school, no child should have to go through that.
No.
And after I graduated from Bronxville, I had convinced my parents at that time to take all the other children out of the school system,
right.
and they did get out. My way of approaching it, curiously enough, had to do very much with a conversation with my father, and he said, when I said to him, this is not workable.
Yeah.
We really, forget me. This isn't about me, Dad. Just think about the other 5 younger kids.
Yeah.
And, I had brothers coming home with black eyes, and,
Incredible.
and he said, you have to treat it like a job. I don't think we can afford financially to change this situation right now.
Oh.
So I don't think any young woman who's looking for her first date
Yeah, right.
is going to be able to treat it like a job. But it did really create in me this attitude of, what does tough it out mean?
Yeah.
What does it really mean? What can I learn from this and still be open?
Yep.
I don't want to close myself off. So I chose to really overcompensate for the prejudice.
Right.
And I went out for, I'm not athletic, but I went out for being a cheerleader.
Yeah.
And I became the president of the choral group, and I went out for the school newspaper. And
Yep.
it was like, I was determined to show them that their ideas of what a Jewish woman were wrong.
Yes.
And it was exhausting.
Yeah, right.
I'm glad I made some good friends along the way, but the whole idea of being in New York, I'd grown up in Yonkers,
Yeah.
which was only about, 6 miles
so
away.
Close. Yeah.
Yeah, it was maddening. It was almost like you were in a movie. I felt it was unreal.
Yeah.
The very insular nature of the Bronxville community, and how reinforcing the prejudice was without ever interacting with Jews.
Right. Incredible. As a kid growing up in a suburb of New York City, I watched a lot of TV, especially sports. So if the first Syms ad ran at halftime of a Giants game in 1974, there's a pretty good chance I saw it live. I saw many more of their commercials in subsequent years, and Marcy's dad always came across as a genuine and honest man. And it doesn't surprise me that one of his mottos was, "Don't let the bad guys win." I was also really interested to learn about Marcy's grandmother. As I've said in earlier episodes, in many ways, immigrants are the ultimate optimists. And it's amazing to think of her coming over to the US from Romania in 1906, later having a job of her own, and then passing along so much wisdom and inspiration to her granddaughter, Marcy. And it's heartbreaking to hear that not so many years ago, Marcy and her siblings faced such bigotry and bullying when they were growing up. And as you'll soon hear, Marcy took these early experiences and channeled them into a life of looking out for and standing up to bullies, and working for the welfare of those being pushed around. Getting back to our conversation, we'll hear how Marcy was a trailblazer even as a young girl in her religious community. I had no idea that this was such a big issue. You were in a synagogue that didn't have bat mitzvahs.
Right.
They did bar mitzvahs. So when I was that age, I was in a school, there was a lot of Jewish kids in our school, and I was on the bar mitzvah and bat mitzvah circuit. It was great. It was the greatest parties ever at that age.
That's right.
But I just thought girls got them all the time. But you actually, as a 12-year-old, pushed for that in your synagogue? Where did that come from?
Well, we belonged to a conservative synagogue in Yonkers. It was a terrific congregation, a lot of fun, good relationships, wonderful Hebrew school, Sunday school. But it was not the belief that girls were part of this ceremonial becoming an adult. That was not part of it.
Right.
And it only started in Reform Judaism in the late 60s, 70s. So in the more conservative congregations, it just wasn't heard of. So when I just kept, I mean, I said this years later when I was managing, and I said, management by nagging really works.
Yes.
And what I did was the rabbi with my parents, with the cantor, was like, you got to let me do this. This is not fair. You got to let me do this. So what they decided, there was a compromise, and I could do the Friday night service without the seriousness of the Saturday morning service. But I didn't have all of the accoutrements of that celebration, but I was very proud of pulling it off.
Incredible. I mean, that's just, and I assume, or no, let me ask you, is conservative Judaism, is it now acceptable? Is it, are bat mitzvahs?
Totally.
Yeah. So you were a total trailblazer.
Yeah.
Incredible. And people who haven't met you in person, it's not like you're a physically imposing person, Marcy. I would describe you as, let's say, diminutive. There had to be something in your spirit at that young age that do you think that was your grandmother coming through you? Did your parents have your back? Like, how did that work?
I do think that my grandmother and her stories had a great deal of influence on me. I also think that we are a product of the times in which we live.
Sure.
And I do believe, the Feminine Mystique came out in 1963.
Okay.
Betty Friedan, 1963, an
Huge book.
explosion
Huge.
of an idea.
Yeah.
And it was just starting to percolate.
Yeah.
And so when I heard about it, and I saw my mother, who is the mother of 6 and was completely over her head.
Yeah.
My dad worked all the time. I thought there's really something to this. And if we just go along with what is, nothing will ever change. So
Right.
I kind of felt comfortable being a bit of a rebel.
Amazing. And so while your grandmother had encouraged you to have your own employment, to have a job, you weren't always setting out to work in your father's business. Can you explain sort of how that happened and then how you were able to strike that relationship with your dad?
Being the daughter of an entrepreneur and observing what it takes to be an entrepreneur. I mean, 24/7 is not an over exaggeration.
No.
I mean, my father really, on Sunday when the stores were closed, and in those days, he had these smaller stores that were city stores. He himself would transport between 4 stores, the inventory. I found the excitement of being an entrepreneur, the building of something so seductive. I just loved it. But it was with 3 younger brothers, it was not something I really considered having access to. My dad and I loved talking about business.
Yep.
I loved business, and actually, because so many of the things I did as a child with 5 younger brothers and sisters had to do with vacuuming and washing dishes
Right.
and dusting and helping my mom with the laundering. I found my father's world so fascinating.
Yeah.
I couldn't wait for him to come home and tell me more stories about it. But I pursued my own career in broadcasting.
Yes.
And in production, and was able to secure a job as a radio producer after college, and really, really enjoyed that. But I got fired. And that's a humiliating experience,
Sure.
particularly the way this firing came down. And I remember calling my dad after the manager who fired me left my office, and he was particularly vindictive. And my father said, just take your things and leave. You don't have to say another word. And he was right. You don't, you just make sure you're getting your vacation pay.
Yeah, right.
And your unemployment. But, and I did. And my dad asked me to join Syms at that time. And I said, I didn't think so. And I pursued a different area in media and media buying and planning.
Yeah.
And after I did that for a while, I realized that I could actually bring a skill to my father that he really needed at that time. And he was also looking to open a store outside of the New York, New Jersey area where he was. And this store was outside of Washington, D.C. in Falls Church, Virginia.
Yes.
So I proposed that I work for him for this contracted period of 3 months to do the media plan.
Yeah.
And I just loved being involved with something that exciting. I just couldn't wait to get to work. I couldn't wait to do something new. And it really satisfied so much of what makes me happy, which is fulfilling curiosity,
Yes.
constantly learning something, always being available to a new idea and figuring out if it's a good idea or it should be canned. And it was great. I loved it. So after we opened the store and I finished my 3 months, I told my father that I wanted to do it full time. And he said, "What do you want to do?" And I said, "Well, I'd like to bring to the company the skills that I brought to the opening. But I also want to do whatever you think needs to be done right now." I didn't have any preconceived notions about how he ran the company. I knew that my father was very strong-willed. I knew that he already had 3 sons working for him, and that was not easy. So I wanted to be a value added,
Yes.
not a hanger-oner.
Yes.
And we worked together really, really well.
Hearing Marcy describe how she convinced her congregation to allow her a bat mitzvah is pretty remarkable, and it's amazing how early in her life she was already developing a dogged determination. I define an optimist as someone who believes that tomorrow will be better than today and that they have a role to play in making it so. Marcy didn't just hope that someday girls would enjoy the same coming-of-age ceremony as boys. She set out herself to make it happen. And later in life, she shows great resilience, today telling without hesitation what it was like to get fired, but then figuring out a way to bring her newly gained media skills into her dad's company. Now let's get back to our conversation to learn more about Marcy's time at the Syms Corporation. I grew up watching your dad and later you on these commercials, and any new business is hard.
Yeah.
The retail business is so hard, so competitive that you need something. You can't just outwork everybody else. That's going to be part of it no matter what. You have to have a point of differentiation. And the way that your stores, I can still see the commercials. So can you explain? You have the price on the suit, let's say.
Well, this was the commercial that my father asked me to do. He actually asked me to do this before I started working at Syms. This is when I was working somewhere else, and I said, "Dad, I can't do this. I don't work at Syms. It's not honest to represent." So once I was there for real, I did the automatic markdown price tag.
Yes.
And it's over a 30-day period, and every 10 selling days, there would be a markdown. And to start with, the price that was on the ticket, we would show the nationally advertised price.
Yes.
And then the Syms price. And the Syms price at that point would be between 10 and 20% of the wholesale price of the manufacturer.
Amazing.
And the way that we were able to do this, and it was only on women's dresses.
Okay.
This was not throughout the store. There's no way a business could support it.
Right.
Because this was in effect either a lost leader.
Yeah.
Or a wash.
Right.
It was never an area for profit.
Right.
This markdown tag was a marketing commitment in order to differentiate. And showing that we really took a risk in doing this commercial, because my face was only on the commercial for 8 seconds.
Okay.
The other 22 seconds to make that 30-second commercial was just on that static picture of that ticket.
I still remember it.
Yeah.
I'm not kidding. It's incredible.
I understand.
Incredible. Yeah. And so now you're in the company, you wind up rising to the very top of the company. So much happens in these years. We'll gloss over a little bit because we want people to go out and get your book, Leading with Respect. And then as happens, especially I think in a family business, there's all these almost like Shakespearean things happening, right? And the company went public. And at one point, you're the CEO. You are the youngest female CEO of a New York Stock Exchange traded company. Things are coming fast and furious, the succession. And I want to talk some more about your resilience because you also had personal tragedy in your life. I mean, it's all here. You lost, within a year, you lost a brother and a sister to a heart ailment. Can you talk about the resiliency? And I'm going to quote your dad here from the book. Your father said, resiliency, not perfection, resiliency, that is the signature of greatness. How did you persevere through all of these things? How were you so resilient?
I didn't feel I had a choice.
Yeah.
I probably would not have had the same reaction if I was working for a non-parent boss.
Right.
But my father was the parent of the two people who died, my brother Stephen and my sister Adrian, within 10 months of each other. And Stephen was 45, Adrian was 37. My father was really, it was a blow to his gut and a blow to his heart.
Of course.
And it took a while. It took a while for him to get over it. So I was feeling, okay, you don't have a time now to feel sorry or to grieve. You got to step up to the plate. You chose this path and let's see what you're made of. I did a lot of self-talking.
Yeah.
I also did something that I mean, for anyone, there are so many great books about grief now.
Yes.
But I did go to therapy, grief therapy, to understand. After my sister passed, I was like, whoa. Besides, everyone in the family should go to a cardiologist now. There was also this sense of how does one incorporate that kind of loss and not take their joy factor down several pegs.
Right.
And the thing about grief is that everyone's grief is very personal. Everyone's grief has its own path.
Yep.
But I accepted after studying it that some of those stages of grief where they talk about anger and denial and it's really not accurate.
No.
Everyone's is personal.
Yes.
And so don't try to fit your experience of grief into anyone else's life. Take it on full throttle, experience it, and try to not do what I did, which was push it off for a future date.
Yes.
But that's what I felt I needed to do. So the resiliency, it was more in a drip, drip, drip.
Yes. Right.
As opposed to now we're going to deal with this.
Right.
So the grieving was a drip, drip, drip.
It's an amazing story though, Marcy, because yes, it was a drip, 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 but it seems to me you sort of answered the call for your family. There was this moment where these awful things were happening. Your father was experiencing what he was experiencing, but so much of your family is in that company, and someone's got to take the wheel. Yeah. And somehow you inserted yourself. And I would say that was an act of courage, which is my segue into another fantastic quote from your book. This one from Elizabeth Cady Stanton, who said, "The best protector any woman can have, one that will serve her at all times and in all places, is courage."
Yeah.
And that's a strong word, but it seems to me that also is a big mark of your life and your career, is having this courage, whether it's getting through the high school you experienced or getting through these personal loss, or to take the helm of a company with your family's name on it. Incredible.
Well, I think that was actually before Churchill made it part of his very famous Churchill quotes, where he said, courage is the most important of all the characters, because without it, no other characteristic really works. The idea of courage can be a very small thing. It doesn't have to be a grand thing like Churchill and his winning his courage, projecting a win for World War II for England. Courage can be as small as speaking up in a board meeting, because you see something that's being advanced in the discussion, or something that's being overlooked, that is not ethical,
Yep.
that is not in keeping with the values of the company.
Yep.
Courage inserts itself in so many places. And it has really, at its very core, I think, to do with personal values.
Yes.
How you think about your values, how you've arrived at those values, how those values have been tested. And the reason that I focused on respect as a theme is because I would never have gone to Syms to work if I didn't feel and know through actions that my father respected me.
Yes.
He respected my process, how I got to decisions. He respected my values. And I learned from working in other places that the thing that made me most withdraw from a situation was feeling not respected.
Interesting. Yes, I could see that. And I think my guess is too, going through the things you went through personally, and especially in the formative years of high school, some of the worst things we all go through, one of the silver linings is a sense of empathy. And I bet you don't have much patience for bullies in any setting.
None at all.
And you probably wouldn't have had that anyway, but you have it and then some, given what you've been through.
That's right. Yeah, I have a really strong smell factor. I can tell a bully when they enter the room.
I love that. And so the courage was called upon again and again. So you're running the company, and the field is getting so much more competitive, and 9/11 has disrupted retailing, and all these things are happening, and Syms acquires Filene's, and that's more problematic. And it really, the business did not have a fairy tale ending. It was very tough to the end. Bankruptcy filings, people threatening you, literally thugs, creditors. So it doesn't stop for you, Marcy. And somehow, though, you get through that. And it's interesting to hear your father, too, at one point during a business deal, trying to, as they say, take some money off the table. But a lot of it was geared towards his hope for philanthropy and the Syms Foundation. And so I'd like to, yeah, and it was a beautiful thing about your dad, and you've carried on that legacy so well. I'd love to, shall we say, pivot here and talk a little bit about your incredible nonprofit, your philanthropy work. And let's start with, what are the causes? What are the things you look for when you're going to apply your talent, your energy, and your treasure, if you will, to a cause or a philanthropy?
Mostly I look to see if it uniquely has identified an area that other philanthropies are not going at in the same way.
Okay.
Other organizations, other foundations, other not-for-profits. I'll give you a perfect example: PEN America. PEN America is an organization that we have supported. We actually have a Syms director for free speech, and there's with PEN America, we now have 3 offices in the United States. They're all about the book bans,
yes,
not being in keeping with our founding values.
Yes.
They're all about recognizing authors. Another one would be the American Heart Association, of which I served on the board, and saw an opportunity after my sister died to be more of a voice for addressing research having to do with women.
Yes.
After my sister died, I became aware of my own body's ability to create cholesterol. And I started having all of these statin drugs. And what was interesting to me with the kind of side effects that I had, and some of them that I couldn't take, was that there was no research on women. That every drug that I was asked to take, there was no scientific method to tell me what I could expect from that drug.
Right.
So the American Heart Association, we were able to get them to focus on a women's campaign, and today that's the Go Red campaign, and raising money for research on women's heart disease. What are the symptoms for women, which are different? There are the Tannenbaum Foundation, which is a foundation started by a friend of mine that focuses on religious cooperation. And that's where very specifically the Syms Foundation was able to support and grow a campaign against bullies in school. What is the main reason that bullies don't get dealt with? It's because teachers don't know how to do it.
Yes.
So we created a handbook, started in the New York City public schools and now available more broadly for teachers, a handbook on how to deal with class bullies.
Amazing.
There are so many ways, small ways. There are certainly larger ways like the NPR and PBS that were from the very beginning of the foundation were very important to my father and I in understanding. We both loved this country so much and felt so privileged to be here and not in the old country, as my grandparents called it.
Yes.
And we knew that it was only through investigative reporting and good journalism. And journalists are a very professional group. And at NPR and the NewsHour and PBS, they have some of the best journalists around who at least get 3 sources on any story. So those were things that we identify and still do, along with things having to do with scientific research. We've long supporters of the Weizmann Institute in Israel, which, like the Rockefeller University here in America, is a pure scientific research. They don't do patents. They don't make money off of drugs. They discover things and put it out there. And there have been some incredible, both, of course, Rockefeller, which I've personally been a supporter of for many years. But in Weizmann, we've done some amazing support for the use of immunotherapies for disease.
It would have been hard enough for Marcy to be a young female CEO of a public company, but being the leader of a business that was founded by her dad brought added challenges, especially when tragedy struck her family. When 2 of Marcy's siblings died within 10 months of each other, her father was naturally devastated. But rather than take the time she could have used to grieve, Marcy felt a responsibility to keep the company going. Looking back on all of this today, she offers great advice to realize that everyone's grief is different and that we all need to deal with it in our own ways, and that we shouldn't try to push it off. And not only does Marcy have no patience for bullies, she says she can detect them the minute they walk into the room. And following her dad's advice to have the courage to stick to her personal values, Marcy continues to engage in impactful philanthropy in a variety of sectors, while also working to uphold the values of this country, which she and her family has appreciated so much. And now, back to the final segment of this Blue Sky conversation with Marcy Syms. People want to have a hopeful outlook on the future. The next 10, 20 years in healthcare are going to be pretty remarkable and what's going on. And I did not realize your connection to the Go Red campaign. I attended several Go Red luncheons when I lived in Maine, and they were very eye-opening to me. In addition to what you said about lack of testing for women and the drug efficacy with women, it was also, and I always hesitate to share this with my wife, the first lady of Optimism, because it reinforces this idea that like when men get a cold, they complain, more than women. But it bears out in heart treatment where chest pains, either women underreport or in some ways worse, are dismissed by the physician in ways that men aren't. So it's really important work. And I know it's important to you given your family's history. And I just wanted to underscore that. I had no idea that the role you played, but it's really an incredible legacy.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Well, now at least in an emergency room, most of the doctors in that emergency room have been given through their education, getting their MD, or just having a sign on the wall of the emergency room,
right.
different symptoms for a woman having a heart attack and a man having a heart attack.
Yeah, women, let's just say women are tougher, which brings me to another quote. I'm a sucker for great quotes, and your book is full of them. I hadn't heard this one. A woman is like a tea bag. You don't know her strength until she gets into hot water.
Isn't
Eleanor Roosevelt for the win. It's a great
Eleanor. Go Eleanor. She's a font of wisdom.
And you have found yourself in and out of hot water your whole life, and it's a remarkable thing to having known you and then to learn more about it in your book and on the incredible resilience and courage that you've demonstrated. Something else I'd like to talk to you about as we approach the end of our conversation is lifelong learning. And I have found this, for me, surprising connection as I've now, past 100 episodes of this podcast, looking for things that people have in common. And just about everybody I interview, if they don't describe themselves as, they clearly are lifelong learners. And you and I met in an academic fellowship setting. I know you didn't mention, because it's not necessarily philanthropy. It's not philanthropy. You're investing in Broadway shows, and you just rattled off these philanthropies you're involved in, and you are a lifelong learner. Is that something you think you just had as a kid? Is it something that was just in your home? And where does that come from, and how does it play a role in your life today, this desire to always be learning?
Well, selfishly, I have learned that being a lifelong learner is one of the characteristics of lasting a long time on this earth.
There you go. Yes.
Yes, because if you interview people in their 90s and 100 and the blue zone and all that, it's all about keeping your mind open to new experience, pursuing new and different ideas than you had yesterday for today and the future. And I don't think I actually got that from a specific part of my my culture or my background. I do think that there's something to it in Judaism, in point of fact, because we're constantly questioning things.
Yes, right.
And the joke is you get 5 Jews in a room, you have 5 different opinions,
right.
And if you pursue that a little bit further, and you have 20 questions.
Right.
So that culturally made an impression on me as a young woman. I saw that it was more allotted to men, the privilege of questioning.
Yes.
But I incorporated it in my own personality. And I think being an entrepreneur, absolutely one of the requirements,
no doubt,
is to question and learn. When my dad and I celebrated, I had a 5-year plan when I joined the company, and at the end of the 5-year plan, we took the company public.
Yes,
and we talked about that and what that plan was all about. And during the course of those 5 years, I learned about real estate. I went to NYU Real Estate School. I learned about HR and setting up an HR department. I learned about importing. I went to China in 1981.
Wow.
And one of the things that my dad God bless his memory, he gave me enough rope to hang myself, I'd always say.
Right.
Because if you're afraid, if your curiosity is blunted by the fear of failure,
Yep.
then you won't be curious the next time and you'll miss that opportunity.
Love that. Amazing. Well, for people who want to learn about all kinds of stuff, Leading with Respect is a book I'm going to recommend. And I know it's going to be flying off the shelves. My only question is, what shelf is it going to be on? Because this is an autobiography. This could be considered a business book. It's
an inspirational business book. It's going to be in the business. It's not a memoir. I didn't want to labor over too many of those personal. I wanted to bring the reader that which I learned as opposed to that which I specifically lived through.
Yes. Yes. I think that's a great way of putting it. So there are so many nuggets and lessons to take away from this. And then also it's all wrapped in an incredible life, yours, your dad's, your family's. And I'm so glad you took the time to write this book. And I know our listeners are going to love it. And I know you're busy with this book launch, so I can't thank you enough for taking the time to be with me today, Marcy. It's always great to spend time with you, and I wish you nothing but success.
Thank you, Bill. I enjoy every time we get together. We have great conversations. Thank you.
Take care. I loved hearing Marcy's enthusiastic endorsement of a life of curiosity and inquisitiveness. I wholeheartedly agree with her that not only might these qualities help us have a more interesting and optimistic life, they might even help us to live a longer one. Marcy and I only scratched the surface of what's covered in her brand new book, Leading with Respect, so be sure to check it out if you'd like to learn more. I hope you enjoyed this blue sky conversation with Marcy Syms. Before you go, we'd appreciate you leaving us a rating or review and hope you'll consider subscribing to our podcast to be sure you don't miss any future episodes. This and all Blue Sky episodes are made possible by the incredible editing and mixing done by the team at Sound On, Sound Off. You can learn more about their work at soundonsoundoff.com. All graphic design and cover art for Blue Sky and the Optimism Institute are provided by Crush Graphics. That's Crush with a K, if you'd like to check out more of their fantastic work at crushgraphics.com. Until next time, I'm the founder of the Optimism Institute and host of Blue Sky, Bill Burke, and I thank you for listening.